Welcome back to the Breaking Our Borders podcast. I'm Dr. Michelle Border, and in today's episode, I will discuss social skills and communication. These qualities are taught during childhood, and for people who experience childhood trauma, these qualities were not on the parenting agenda. I will explain what they are, how we may be lacking them, and how we can improve these qualities in this episode. So let's get started breaking our borders together. During childhood, children need to be taught a lot of things. We are not born instinctively knowing how to be mentally and physically healthy humans. We have to be taught how to talk, walk, feed ourselves, groom ourselves, and academic subjects. We also need to be taught how to be socially appropriate with other humans. Adults often think children should just act like adults without realizing that they have to learn these behaviors. Children need to be taught things like controlling their voice level at certain times, controlling their body in certain situations, knowing what to say in different kinds of situations, how to be kind, polite, and use their manners, how to control their emotions, and how to cope with those emotions. All of this learning doesn't happen at a certain age. We don't just wake up one day and have the knowledge of how to get along with others. Children typically learn these skills by observing the adults around them or the lessons taught by adults. While in their home, if a child is experiencing abuse or neglect, chances are that social skills are not being taught. It is also possible that skills are being taught that will not result in positive social skills. There are several social skills we need to learn to make our lives healthier and happier. One of those skills is verbal communication. Speaking clearly, explaining thoughts clearly, using appropriate tone, making eye contact, and using gestures creates positive conversations. Humans need to know how to express their thoughts, share their feelings in a positive way, and not sound accusatory. When we need to communicate a need or problem we have with another person, it's helpful to use I statements, so that the other person doesn't feel attacked and come back with defensive comments. For example, let's say your partner said something to you that came across as insulting. Often people are hurt by the tone of someone's comments and react with their feelings. You might say something like, "Why are you being such a jerk to me?" This kind of statement is going to make your partner feel attacked and become defensive. They may counter with an angry tone and say something like, "You're the one being a jerk. You always take what I'm saying the wrong way." Changing your initial statements to start with an I statement may help you and your partner resolve this issue in a more positive way. I statements are sentences used to express your thought or feeling by starting with "I felt," "I need," or "I would rather." In this case, you would say, "I felt like you were angry with me when you just said that." This doesn't feel like an attack to your partner, and they won't become defensive. It opens the door for them to respond with an explanation. They may say something like, "Oh, no, I'm not angry. I'm sorry if it came across that way." See the difference? This skill can be used in any situation and with anyone you talk to: family, partners, co-workers, or friends. People who grew up in abusive or neglectful homes were likely not shown positive communication, and perhaps not allowed to communicate their needs and wants. In abusive homes, children are often yelled at, not talked to unless to give orders, or told to shut up when expressing their thoughts or feelings. Some children learn not to communicate what they want or need for fear of upsetting the abuser, for fear of being punished, and because they have been taught that what they want to express does not really matter. Others learn from their parents' example of using abusive language that is filled with anger to communicate in this type of situation. Both situations, a lack of learning and the abuse, leads to not having skills to communicate positively. Another social skill is active listening. This is where you pay attention to others. understand their perspective, and respond appropriately. Active listening means that we hear what the other person is expressing and accept that they have the right to express their thoughts without taking what they have said personally. In my example before, when your partner explains their reasoning, you would listen to what they say, recognize that they didn't mean to do what you thought they did, and then move forward. Hearing the other person's thoughts makes them feel accepted by you, and they'll be more likely to communicate positively with you in the future. Often people hear what the other person says, but then immediately make a self-focused reply like, "Yeah, that happened to me once. Let me tell you about it." Or they may say, "Whatever you say, but I still think." We typically don't want to consider further communication when the other person makes it all about them. Give the other person time to share their thoughts, and hopefully they will give you time to share yours. When we are heard by another person, we feel accepted, cared for, and respected by that person. For children who have experienced trauma, there was probably no one that actively listened to them, so they were not able to learn this skill from an example, nor was it practiced with them. These children don't listen to others when they communicate and become adults who will struggle in relationships because the other person will not feel heard. Empathy is another positive social skill. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It can be measured on somewhat of a spectrum. Some people have little to no empathy, while others have quite a lot. There are a couple kinds of empathy also. Being able to think about what another person is feeling and needing, actually feeling what others feel, having the same emotional and physical reactions that someone else does, recognizing someone else's feelings and then helping them to cope with them. These types can be experienced separately or together, and again, can be on various levels of intensity. Children from abusive or neglectful homes are not shown empathy and either don't learn how to show it or develop it as a coping mechanism to try to stop the abuse. In some situations, the child learns to read the abuser's actions, feelings, and behaviors in hopes of deterring the abuse before it happens. While in other situations, children are not able to develop a deeper level of empathy because they weren't shown it in their earlier years. Another social skill is conflict and resolution. That is effectively managing disagreements and finding solutions. This is also sometimes called problem and resolution. Many people struggle with this, usually because they weren't taught how, and because they become emotionally involved to the point of not being able to listen or recognize what the other person is feeling. When we feel we have been done wrong, we often voice our thoughts with anger. This is what I mentioned before about communication. When we communicate with anger, the other person is going to be on the defensive, and an argument will happen instead of positive communication. For conflicts to be resolved, both people need to be willing to communicate, listen, and work towards a solution where both people are satisfied with the outcome. Many times, one or both people are not willing to compromise to find a solution. Emotions and wants take over, and one or both people refuse to back down from what they want. An example of this would be when my husband asked me to not use a tone in my voice when I asked him to do things around the house. I didn't realize I had a tone, but he said I was saying things in a way that made him feel like I was talking down to him, making him feel stupid. My immediate response was a defensive remark of, "I didn't mean to sound that way." But then I recognized that even though I didn't mean to make my husband feel that way, that is what he felt. It was my responsibility to take ownership for what I made him feel, even if I meant it or not. However, a lot of people don't see things that way. They see it as, "I didn't mean it, so it's on you if you took it the wrong way." This accuses the other person of being wrong, and it's not wrong for them to have the feelings they have. This usually builds conflict because one person doesn't feel heard and respected, and the other feels accused of something they didn't intend. Back to the example of my husband, after I made my statement, I then said, "I'm sorry that I made you feel that way. I will be aware of my tone in the future. If I do it again, please let me know by kindly bringing it to my attention, so I am aware right then of what I'm doing. Since I didn't mean to have that tone, I didn't even know what it sounded like. By asking him to help me understand what I was doing that upset him, I validated his feelings. I did not take his accusation as an insult, but instead offered a way to improve the situation. The next time I talked to him, I focused on my tone, being aware of how I sounded. Sometimes when I'm thinking of several things, I sound irritated or impatient when talking to someone. I'm not upset with them. I'm just focused on other things and not paying attention to how I sound. For children who experienced abuse or neglect, they are typically always the problem and can never figure out how to find a resolution to that. Children are blamed by the abuser for so many things, instead of the parent teaching and showing them how they can change their behavior to be more appropriate. The parent solves their problems by expressing anger, disappointment, or even violence, not showing a child how to positively find a solution. Children will use these methods when faced with problems, or give up on the problem because they don't have the social skills they need to work through it. Emotional regulation is another social skill. This is managing your own emotions to respond appropriately in social situations. This goes along with what I said earlier. Many people think with their emotions. Instead of actively listening to what someone has said, they hear an accusation or insult and become defensive. The example of my husband telling me about how I made him feel shows that I controlled my emotions to hear what was happening with his emotions. We both controlled our emotions to work towards a solution. Other emotions that children would need to learn to control are excitement, anger, disappointment, and sadness. These are all natural feelings that are okay to feel and express, but children need help understanding how to control those emotions without having physical and verbal outbursts. Children from abusive or neglectful homes are not taught how to control their bodies, words, or emotions. They act out, yell, become violent, maybe when they lose control of their emotions. This lack of regulation carries into adulthood and affects relationships for the child's whole life. Cooperation and teamwork is another good social skill. This is working effectively with others towards a common goal. Humans want to have their own way with things, want to use their ideas, and have control over what they do. When working with or in a relationship with other people, that's not always doable. People have to learn to give and take in situations so that everyone involved is happy. Cooperation means that each person gets a part of what they want in the situation, not just one person dictating how things will go. Teamwork means that you offer your talents and abilities to the situation, but not to the point that no one else can offer theirs. It also means sharing the recognitions and criticisms of a task completed by the team. Children who've experienced trauma are not shown cooperation and teamwork at home. They are shown that the adult has control, makes the decisions, and the only recognition the child gets is for being the cause of the dysfunction. These children will struggle when playing with friends, being on a team or in a social group, and at relationships. Another skill is self-awareness. This is recognizing how your own behavior affects social interactions. This is an understanding of your own personality, feelings, thoughts, and actions, and what those will do to other people. It's also recognizing your strengths, weaknesses, and motivations, and how they affect yourself and others. Self-awareness is a foundation for emotional intelligence, better decisions, stronger relationships, and personal growth. Children from abusive or neglectful homes are not given information to understand who they are. Their parents do not celebrate their personality traits. They don't provide experiences for the child to learn more about their likes and dislikes, and they aren't allowed to be their true self because the parent controls them to be quiet, invisible, or conformed in a way that won't provoke more abuse. Sometimes children in these situations become someone they are not at all, in hopes of pleasing the parent. children will search for and embrace traits that they think will make their parent happy. Without self-awareness, a child will learn that they have to be a certain way to obtain love, acceptance, and keep people happy. Children from traumatic experiences don't know how to express their feelings because they weren't allowed to. They weren't shown how to describe or cope with those feelings. Feelings were probably seen as an attack on the abuser and seen as the child was doing something wrong. This can impact their self-esteem, self-worth, and self-image because of not knowing these social skills. Lacking social skills significantly impacts a person's mental and physical health, leading to increased stress, loneliness, anxiety, and depression. It can hinder relationship building, career growth, and academic success. A lack of social skills create barriers in a personal and professional life, ultimately affecting a person's overall well-being. It can create borders in our minds that we are lacking certain things and unable to do things that we should know how to do. If you feel that you struggle with social skills due to childhood experiences, check out my journal prompt on my website to help you sort through where you are lacking and think about what you can do to improve that skill. Please check out the Breaking Our Borders website, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and continue listening to podcasts on your favorite podcast provider. Thanks for listening.